Welcome, dear listeners. Tonight, let your thoughts drift gently as we take you on a peaceful journey. This is a space for calm, for quiet moments, and for the kind of stories that settle your heart and slow your breath. Make yourself comfortable, close your eyes if you wish, and allow the world to soften around you. Now, let's begin with tonight's story. Today's story is titled The Living Archive: The Journey of the Circle of Rememberers. Eloane Bradford awoke to the soft glow of dawn filtering through lace curtains, painting her modest apartment in shades of rose and gold. She lay for a moment, savoring the warmth of her quilt and the faint hum of the city beyond her windows. The air smelled faintly of lavender and fresh linen, a comforting scent she'd grown accustomed to over the years she'd called this place home. With a gentle yawn, she reached over to her bedside table, where a small brass clock ticked steadily, 6:17 a.m. Rising, Eloane slipped on a pair of worn leather slippers and padded barefoot across the hardwood floor. She paused by the window, pushing aside a trailing ivy vine to peer out. The cobblestone streets of the Meadowmont district lay quiet, save for a lone baker's cart rolling down the avenue, its bell jingling like a distant memory. Above, the sky unfurled in lavender ribbons, promising a day untainted by storm. She paused to draw in a deep breath of the crisp morning air, then crossed the room to open the kitchen shutters. A small brass teapot sat ready on the stove, its porcelain companion cups waiting patiently. Eloane set a kettle to boil and reached for her favorite mug, a simple earthenware piece hand-painted with sunflowers. She measured loose-leaf jasmine tea into a silver infuser, careful to use just the right amount, 2 teaspoons, steeped for precisely 4 minutes, as her grandmother had taught her. While the water heated, Eloane moved to her small writing desk tucked into the corner. A stack of journals lay there, each one bulging with memories, sketches, and ideas for stories she intended to write someday, fantasy tales woven from the fabric of her dreams. Today, though, she would focus on something more immediate, the letter she had sent to her best friend, Corin, almost 2 weeks ago, and the one she expected from him today. A soft hiss startled her as the kettle reached a rolling boil. She turned off the stove, poured the water over the jasmine leaves, and set a timer. Then, with the teapot nestled in her arms, she made her way to the little table by the window, where 2 chairs faced each other, one for herself, and one she'd set for Corin should he come knocking. Unexpectedly, at exactly 6:25 a.m., the timer chimed. Eloane removed the infuser, inhaling the fragrant steam as she lifted the cup to her lips. The first sip was warm and soothing, awakening her senses. She closed her eyes, allowing the taste to settle, a delicate floral sweetness that reminded her of hidden gardens and secret promises. Her gaze drifted back to the window, where shadows shifted with the growing light. The baker's cart had given way to a milk delivery horse, its soft brown coat glistening as the driver hummed a cheerful tune. Beyond them, the tall spires of the old clock tower cast long, slender shapes across the red brick rooftops. It was the kind of morning that felt pregnant with possibility, as though at any moment a single choice could set events in motion that would alter the course of one's destiny. Finishing her tea, Eloane set the cup down and rose, determined to seize the day. She moved to a small wooden shelf lined with potted herbs, rosemary, thyme, and a miniature basil tree, and carefully gathered sprigs of each. Their green vitality reminded her that life thrived even in the smallest corners. Into a woven basket she placed the herbs alongside a fresh baguette from yesterday's bakery run, still crisp on the outside, and a small jar of honey picked up at the weekly market. Today, she decided, she would treat herself to a picnic at the river walk. Eloane dressed quickly in a flowing linen dress the color of pale sage, cinched at the waist with a braided leather belt. She braided her chestnut hair loosely, letting tendrils fall around her face. A single silver locket her grandmother's hung from her neck, glinting as she moved. Before leaving, she glanced at the brass clock once more. It read 7:03 a.m. Perfect. Stepping out into the narrow hallway of her building, she exchanged polite nods with Mrs. Dalrymple, the elderly seamstress who lived down the hall, and with Raphael, the young musician who practiced violin in apartment 4B. Both greeted her with warm smiles. The hallway smelled of polished wood and faint thread, a comforting blend she'd grown to love. Outside, the city had begun to wake. Shopkeepers unlocked doors, street lamps flickered off one by one. Eloane inhaled, feeling alive in a way she hadn't in weeks. She followed the familiar path toward the river walk, a meandering stone pathway that hugged the gentle flow of the Solace River. Tall elms and willows arched overhead, their leaves whispering in the breeze. Early risers, joggers in bright athletic gear, a painter with an easel and canvas, an elderly couple walking hand in hand gave her nods of greeting as she passed. Finding a favorite spot beneath a willow tree, Eloane spread a soft woolen blanket and set out her modest feast. The baguette split open easily, revealing a tender crumb that they say would make angels weep. She drizzled honey over a torn chunk of the bread and savored the sweet, tranquil moment as the sun climbed higher. She tucked sprigs of rosemary into her hair for good luck, smiling as the herbal aroma mingled with the soft breeze. Her thoughts turned to Corin, his mischievous grin, the way he could make her laugh until tears streamed down her cheeks, the late-night conversations they'd shared beneath a blanket of stars. She wondered whether his letter would arrive today, and what news it might hold. Perhaps he would tell her of his travels through the sunflower plains, of the strange ruins he'd heard tales of, or of a mysterious patron who wished to commission his artwork. As the midday light filtered through the willow's branches in a dappled dance, Eloane felt a gentle ripple of anticipation. Today was the first day in a long time that she could remember feeling certain that something extraordinary awaited her, something just beyond the horizon, whispered to her by the river's flow and the rustling leaves. She closed her eyes, laying back on the blanket, allowing the world around her to lull her into a state of serene readiness. When Eloane Bradford awoke the next morning, the gentle hush of dawn was broken only by the soft flutter of a letter sliding through her mailbox slot. She had returned home late the night before, her mind still drifting with the memory of jasmine tea and river winds. Now, as the pale light filtered through her lace curtains, she felt a stirring of excitement. Perhaps today brought news that would reshape the course of her quiet life. Dressing quickly in a simple cream blouse and navy skirt, Eloane tied her hair back with a ribbon the color of storm clouds before hurrying downstairs and crossing the cobblestone courtyard to retrieve her mail. There, among the usual stack of bills and postcards, lay a single envelope sealed with dark crimson wax bearing Corin's distinctive seal, a stylized quill and the intertwined initials C. R. Heart pounding, she broke the seal and gently unfolded the heavy parchment within. Dearest Eloan, it began, the handwriting looping elegantly across the page. If you read these words, it means you have welcomed the day with hope in your heart. I write not with idle news but with an invitation and a mystery that I believe only you can unravel. Meet me at dawn's first light tomorrow at the edge of the sunflower plains, by the ancient standing tree. There, I have discovered something extraordinary, something that could change everything we thought we knew about the old kingdom's hidden legacy. Bring only your courage and your brightest curiosity. Yours, ever faithfully, Corin. Eloan's fingers trembled with the electricity of possibility. The sunflower plains, a vast swath of golden blooms that stretched beyond the city limits, had long been the stuff of legend. Folk tales whispered of ancient ruins buried somewhere within the rolling fields, and travelers spoke of seeing strange stone monoliths beneath the waves of yellow petals. That Corin, her dearest friend and most daring companion, had found such a place filled her with both awe and the sweet ache of longing. She spent the remainder of the morning preparing for the journey. At her writing desk, she rummaged through drawers until she found a slender journal bound in green leather, the one she used for maps and notes whenever she dared to stray beyond Meadowmont. She tucked a quill and ink bottle beside it, then gathered provisions, a small loaf of crusty bread, a wedge of sharp goat cheese, a few dried apples, and the flask of sweet rosewater cordial she had reserved for celebrations. She looped the items into her woven basket and slung it over her shoulder, fastening the leather strap that cut diagonally across her chest. Next came the matter of attire. She chose a lightweight travel cloak the color of midnight, lined with pockets for hiding small treasures or tools. Underneath, she wore sturdy leather boots that rose to mid-calf, their soles thick enough to protect her feet from rough stones or thorny brush. Before leaving, she fastened her silver locket around her neck, pressing her thumb against its smooth surface as though seeking strength from her grandmother's memory. As the sun dipped toward midday, Eloan paused at her window, gazing out at the still empty streets. The midday bustle had not yet begun, and the city lay dreamlike beneath the golden haze of afternoon light. She wondered whether Corin had already arrived at the plains, whether he stood beneath the standing tree even now, waiting. A flutter of nerves swept through her, just as thrilling as anything she had ever felt, and laced with the potent sweetness of shared adventure. She slipped out the front door, locking it carefully behind her, and hurried toward the eastern gate of Meadowmont. On the way, she passed Raphael, practicing an impromptu melody on his violin in the courtyard. He paused mid-bow when he saw her. Off on an adventure, he teased softly, lowering his instrument. Eloan smiled brightly. You could say that. My friend has asked me to meet him at the sunflower plains at dawn. Raphael's eyebrows lifted. Those plains are legendary. May your steps be sure and your heart true. Thank you, she replied, giving him a playful salute before continuing on. The road that led beyond the city walls was well trodden, at first paved with aged cobblestones before giving way to packed dirt dotted with wildflowers. Eloan inhaled the fragrance of Queen Anne's lace and wild thyme as she walked, her mind buzzing with questions. What had Corin discovered? A buried map. A fragment of an ancient manuscript. Or perhaps something far stranger still, a relic of the Old Kingdom, or the key to a magical secret. Around mid-afternoon, the path narrowed into a thin trail winding through a gently sloping meadow. The air shimmered with heat, but the trail was shaded by tall grasses that bowed gracefully in the breeze. Eloan paused to jot a quick sketch of the trail's turning point in her journal, marking the location with a small X. She ducked into a clump of golden stalks to brush a thorn from her cloak and uncovered a small, moss-covered stone cairn no more than a pile of 3 weathered boulders. Curious, she traced her fingers across the lichen that bloomed in pale green veins. A sudden rustling startled her, and she looked up to see a figure step into the clearing. Corin. He was taller than she remembered, and his dark hair caught the light in glints of auburn. His eyes, vivid and earnest, met hers, and a warm grin spread across his face. "Eloan," he said, voice low with relief and excitement. "I was beginning to wonder if you might not come." "Never," she replied, brushing past him to embrace his arm. "I wouldn't miss this for the world." Corin led her onward, deeper into the meadow. The sun dipped lower as they walked, painting the horizon in stripes of amber and rose. Soon, the fields opened onto the legendary sunflower plains, acres upon acres of towering yellow flowers that swayed like an ocean, their faces all turned to the west. In the distance, Eloan could make out the ancient standing tree, a gnarled oak as broad as 2 men and at least a century old, its bark furrowed with time. They approached the tree in silence, the only sound the rustle of sunflowers brushing against one another. Corin paused at the tree's base and knelt, brushing aside a circle of fallen blossoms to reveal half-buried stone steps descending into the earth. Eloan's breath caught. Steps. How long have they been here? Centuries, at least, Corin answered, pulling a small lantern from his pack. "I found them this morning when I followed an owl's call. There's a hollow beneath the tree, some kind of chamber. I wanted you here first." Eloan knelt beside him, her heart pounding. She reached out to touch the edge of a stone tread, feeling an electric tingle travel up her arm. The air around them was cool and still, as though the hidden chamber exhaled a breath long held. "Are you ready?" Corin asked softly, lighting the lantern's wick with a flick of flint. Eloan nodded, her pulse thrumming in her ears. "I've never been more ready." Together, they began to descend the steps, the lantern's glow revealing ancient carvings on the walls, runes etched in a language she did not recognize, patterns of vines and stars, winding into the darkness below. Each carving seemed to hum with quiet power, as though the stones themselves remembered secrets lost to time. With Corin at her side, Eloan felt her world expand with possibility. Whatever awaited them in the sunlit depths of the standing tree, it would be a story neither of them could have ever imagined, and one they would write together, one discovery at a time. Eloan's heart pounded like distant thunder as she and Corin pressed forward into the subterranean chamber beneath the standing tree. The air grew cool and still, carrying the scent of damp earth and ancient stone. Each step down the narrow, spiral staircase seemed to echo through centuries, as if the walls themselves remembered every footfall. Eloan's lantern cast dancing shadows on the carved runes, their angular shapes shifting in the wavering light. "Look at this," Corin whispered, crouching to examine a relief etched into the wall. Golden veins of mineral ran through the stone, tracing a pattern of twisting vines that culminated in a single, five-pointed star. Beneath it, words in a script neither could read spiraled outward like tendrils. Corin traced the edges with his fingertip, his brow furrowed. Eloan knelt beside him. "It feels alive," she murmured. "As though it's breathing." She placed her palm against the cold rock. A low hum thrummed through her fingertips, resonating in her chest. Goosebumps rose on her arms. Corin straightened, extinguishing the lighter glow of his lantern for a moment to let his eyes adjust. "There's more ahead," voices, too faint to make out. "Come on." He rose and advanced, the beam of his lantern bobbing. They entered a vast, circular hall carved from the living rock. Pillars ringed the chamber, each carved in the likeness of a stylized tree, their branches intertwining overhead to form a vaulted ceiling. At the center, a shallow pool of crystalline water reflected their lantern light like fractured stars. The air here was so still that the faintest whisper carried as clearly as a shout. Eloan swallowed. "Do you hear that?" A soft murmur floated above them, like distant chanting. She strained to listen. Corin nodded, stepping to the edge of the pool. "The sound seems to come from beneath the water." He knelt and pressed his ear to the surface. Its language, old, melodic, almost musical. Eloan leaned in beside him. The water rippled as though responding to her presence, sending soft chords rippling through the hall. The runic carvings on the walls glowed faintly, lines of pale blue light tracing along the vines and stars. Eloan gasped and pulled back, stumbling slightly on the polished stone floor. Corin steadied her. "Incredible," he breathed. "It's like the chamber itself. Every element here is part of some larger symphony." Eloan's mind raced. She remembered the legends, the old kingdom's lore of the living archive, a repository of memory and song, hidden deep beneath the sunflower plains. Could this be it? She wondered whether every carved pillar represented a chapter of history, every ripple of water a lost melody waiting to be heard again. Corin produced a small notebook from his cloak and jotted down observations. "We need to document everything, but carefully. This place feels sacred." Eloan nodded, pulling her own journal from her pack. She sketched the pillars, annotating the glowing glyphs. With each stroke of her quill, she felt the chamber guide her hand, as if the story embedded in stone prompted her to record it. Suddenly, the chanting grew louder, as though the chamber's song had taken shape. Eloan looked around in alarm, the lantern's glow pulsed in time with the melody. She realized the pillars were glowing one by one, their crowns lighting the ceiling in soft luminescence. The water's surface rippled faster, forming concentric circles that spread to the edges of the pool. "We should step back," Corin warned, voice tense. "Something's happening." Eloan rose, but the next moment she felt a gentle tug, as though the pool itself reached for her. She staggered forward, mind blurred by an urgent compulsion. Corin lunged to grab her arm. "Eloan, no," he called, pulling her away just as a wave of luminescent mist lifted from the water, swirling around them. She stumbled backwards, heart racing. The mist coalesced in the center of the pool, forming a shape like a woman carved from moonlight, her features impossibly delicate. She rose above the water's surface, arms outstretched, eyes closed as though lost in a silent song. Eloan stared, breath caught in her throat. "Corin, what is that?" Corin's eyes were wide. A vision may be the memory keeper of the Old Kingdom. The Archive's guardian. He raised his lantern higher. "We shouldn't frighten her." The figure opened her eyes, pale blue light shining from her irises. Her lips moved, but no sound emerged, yet Eloan heard the words within her mind, soft as dew. "In the heart of stone, truth slumbers. Seek the seed of remembrance, that the world may awaken." Eloan's pulse thundered. She exchanged a look with Corin. The memory keeper's words were a riddle, but one they needed to solve. "What seed?" Eloan whispered. The figure's form dissolved back into mist, drifting into the pillars until they glowed brighter still. Corin shook his head in wonder. "We have to find it, the seed of remembrance. Here, somewhere in this chamber." He scanned the pillars. "Look for anything that stands out." Eloan approached the nearest pillar, trailing her fingers along the carved vines. At the base, almost hidden beneath moss-like mineral deposits, was a small indentation shaped like an acorn. Her breath caught. "Corin, an acorn." He knelt beside the indentation. "A seed. The seed of remembrance." He reached into his pack and produced the woven basket of herbs and bread. "We need something to place here, something symbolic. Perhaps an offering of life." Eloan pondered for a moment, then carefully removed a single sprig of rosemary from the basket. The herb had thrived in her window box, nourished by morning sun and her tender care. She held it up. "Rosemary remembrance." Corin nodded. "It fits." He stepped aside as Eloan pressed the rosemary into the acorn-shaped cavity. The moment the herb touched the stone, the entire chamber trembled with a low hum. The pillar's glow intensified, bathing the hall in ethereal light. The pool's surface stilled, reflecting a brilliant star that appeared to hang above the water, matching the carved stars on the walls. Eloan gasped at the sight. "It's beautiful." She reached out to touch the light, but it dissipated, leaving the space bathed in soft dawn-like glow. Then, from somewhere deep within the stone, a door slid open, an arched gateway revealed behind one of the pillars. Beyond it, a narrow corridor led further into darkness, lit only by the glow emanating from runes along its walls. Corin exhaled, excitement glittering in his eyes. This is only the beginning. Eloan felt her fear melt into exhilaration. She had stepped into a hidden world, where memory and magic intertwined in stone and song. Together, she and Corin would follow this path, decipher ancient riddles, and awaken the truths long buried beneath the sunflower plains. With her lantern held high, Eloan took the first step into the unknown corridor, her journal clutched in one hand, courage in her heart and the promise of adventure lighting every footfall. Eloan Bradford's lantern flickered in the narrow corridor's half-light, casting dancing shadows on the ancient runes that wound like serpents across the walls. The air here was cooler, still damp with subterranean moisture and tinged with the faintest hint of ozone. Corin stepped close behind her, his breathing steady but eager, and Eloan could feel the soft click of his boots on the stone floor. Each step carried them deeper into a realm untouched by sunlight for centuries, where secrets slept in silence. The corridor stretched for what felt like a heartbeat before curving sharply to the left. Eloan paused at the turn, resting a hand on the cool wall. The runes here glowed a softer blue, as though breathing in rhythm with some hidden pulse. She knelt to trace one carving, an intertwined pair of hands clasping a single seed. At its center gleamed a tiny gemstone set into the stone, a star sapphire no larger than a fingernail. Eloan ran her fingertip over it. The gem was warm to the touch, pulsing like a quiet heartbeat. "Look," she whispered, pointing. Corin leaned over her shoulder, his lantern illuminating the symbol. "That seed," he said, voice hushed. The memory keeper spoke of a seed of remembrance. "Perhaps this is it?" He reached forward as though to touch the gem, but Eloan held up a hand. "Wait. It might be a trap or a key." She drew her journal from her pack and sketched the symbol quickly, then slipped a thin leather glove onto her hand. "I'll try gently pushing it." She pressed the sapphire inward with her gloved fingertip. For a moment, nothing happened, and the corridor shivered, as though released from a decades-long tension. A panel in the wall slid open with a soft rumble, revealing a small alcove lit by phosphorescent moss that glowed pale green. Eloan exhaled. "We should see what's inside." She peered into the alcove. Resting on a stone pedestal within was a small, obsidian box carved in swirling patterns. Its lid bore the same symbol of the clasped hands and seed, and the edges were inlaid with thin bands of silver. Corin crouched beside her. An offering chest may be where pilgrims placed tokens of memory. He glanced at the pedestal's base, where another inscription glowed faintly, "Bring forth the gift of remembrance, and the path shall open." Eloan's pulse quickened. She reached into her pack and withdrew the dried rose petal she had tucked into her journal the day before, from a blossom Corin had given her on her birthday, an act of friendship meant to capture joy's fleeting beauty. The petal was delicate and brittle, its color a deep crimson that had faded at the edges. Yet Eloan felt its significance spike through her chest. It was a token of personal memory and gratitude, perfect for a chamber devoted to remembrance. "Shall I?" she murmured. Corin nodded, his eyes bright in the lamplight. Eloan laid the petal gently inside the box. The moment it touched the obsidian, the moss in the alcove flared to life, illuminating a niche in the floor that concealed a circular stone hatch. The hatch's edge was inscribed with a ring of runes, and at its center, there was no handle, only a shallow depression shaped like the star-shaped glyph they had seen in the chamber above. Corin exhaled in a low whisper. The star. We need to place something there. He rummaged in his pack and withdrew the star sapphire he had pried from the relief above. Carefully, he fit the gem into the depression. The hatch trembled, then groaned open, revealing a descending staircase spiraling away in darkness. Eloan steadied herself against the cool stone. We're going deeper. She looked at Corin. Are you ready? Corin smiled, the lantern casting his shadow large against the walls. With you by my side, always. Together, they stepped onto the staircase. Each step was carved smooth by countless feet over the ages, and the walls on either side were lined with niches holding fragments of pottery, rusted metal tools, and shards of crystal, remnants of offerings left behind by travelers centuries ago. As they descended, the air grew crisper, infused with a faint metallic tang that made their nostrils flare. The glow from the phosphorescent moss overhead was replaced by the warm yellow beam of their lantern, which revealed elegant arches and buttresses of stonework long forgotten by surface architects. At last the steps opened onto a broad chamber whose ceiling arched 20 feet overhead. The walls were covered in frescoes painted in earthen pigments, a procession of figures in flowing robes, bearing scrolls, seeds, and tools, each face serene and knowing. The centerpiece of the fresco spanning the entire back wall depicted a great tree with roots spreading into a book and branches reaching toward the sky. Beneath the tree were written words in a language neither Eloan nor Corin could fully decipher, though a few characters glowed with a soft resonance of familiarity, knowledge, memory, awakening. Eloan's breath caught in her throat at the sight. This is the heart of the archive. She brushed her gloved hand across the fresco's surface, feeling the texture of brush strokes still raised in places. Corin moved to a circular dais at the chamber's center, upon which lay an enormous scroll, sealed with wax that bore the emblem of the memory keeper. He knelt and broke the seal, rolling the parchment open with reverence. The scroll was etched with more of the melodic runes they had first heard in the pool's song, a living script that shimmered as though alive. Lines of the scroll traced the history of the Old Kingdom, from its founding through its golden age and eventual decline, culminating in instructions for those who would rediscover the living archive. How to keep the flame of remembrance alive. Eloan joined him at the dais, her lantern's light reflecting off the aged parchment. She read aloud the opening lines, her voice trembling with awe and the weight of destiny. In days of old, when flesh remembered song, the world knew truth alive in every leaf and stone. But time, like a river, carried memory away, until only the keeper remained to guard the echoes of what once was. To those who come with reverent heart, bring forth the seeds of your past, weave them into the tapestry of this place, and let knowledge bloom anew. Her voice faltered. We're meant to add our own memories to feed this archive. She glanced at Corin. That's why it welcomed our tokens. Corin nodded, eyes bright. This scroll is the foundation. but will it allow us to write upon it? He touched the parchment lightly, and the runes glowed brighter. I think so. He reached into his pack and produced a small vial of ink, a deep indigo that shimmered like starlight. I brought ink, in case. Eloan unrolled the scroll further, revealing a blank column at the edge radiating fenced glyphs. A space for record keepers, she said softly. She took Corin's quill and dipped it into the ink. Her mind raced. What memory should she inscribe? What truth of her life, small or grand, would help awaken the archive? She glanced at Corin. He smiled and began writing his name in the margin, followed by a brief account of their discovery of the standing tree's chamber. Then, hesitantly, she wrote, "Here stands Eloan Bradford, who found courage in dawn's light and friendship in Corin's loyal heart. I bring a memory of laughter beneath sunflowers, of shared secrets by moonlit rivers, and of the promise that all stories, even the smallest, deserve to be kept alive." With each word, the glyphs around her glow line pulsed, rippling outward across the scroll until the entire chamber hummed with a vibrant resonance, as though each painted fresco and mosaic shard responded to her voice. The runes lifted from the parchment, floating in midair, weaving together a web of light that connected the frescoed walls, the dais, and the niches filled with offerings. Eloan felt a warmth bloom in her chest, as though she herself had become part of the archive's living tapestry. Suddenly, the ground trembled beneath them, and a chorus of distant echoes, voices speaking in 1,000 tongues, filled the air. Eloan steadied herself against the dais, breath coming in shallow gasps. Corin's eyes were wide with wonder, but his voice remained calm. "The archive awakens." Eloan nodded, her heart pounding. "It hears us. It remembers." She turned to the fresco of the great tree and whispered, "We are now its custodians." At that moment, a gentle spotlight of pale azure light beamed down from a small opening in the chamber's vaulted ceiling, an ethereal shaft that illuminated the painted branches of the tree, making the leaves shimmer like liquid emerald. The scroll's runes began to swirl and rearrange, forming new patterns that Eloan could not read but felt resonate deep within her bones. It was as though the archive responded to her words by revealing its own hidden truths. Corin placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. "We've done more than discover this place. We've become part of it." Eloan closed her eyes, letting the luminescent glow wash over her. For a moment, she could see countless memories: a child's laughter echoing through a forest, a queen's court dancing beneath starlight, the forging of a sword whose blade sang with power flashing through her mind. They were fragmented but beautiful, a glimpse of the vast store of history the archive held. And now, alongside those ancient echoes, glowed her own small contribution, a testament that even a single memory could ignite the flame of remembrance and pull it into the light. When she opened her eyes again, the chamber was still. The scroll lay rolled open, its runes settled into new configurations. The fresco glowed with quiet satisfaction, and the niches around them shone with the promise that, as long as there were keepers to remember, the living archive would endure. Eloan exhaled, her voice soft but certain. "We have awakened it. Now, we must protect it and learn its secrets. Corin nodded, closing the scroll gently. And share its wisdom with the world, when the time is right. Hand in hand, they stood together beneath the painted tree, two new custodians in a lineage that stretched back through the ages. The path ahead remained shrouded in darkness, but the archive's light fueled by memory and hope would guide them onward into the heart of its ancient song. Eloan Bradford's lantern cast wavering pools of light across the damp stones as she and Corin emerged from the dais chamber into a long vestibule that ran beneath the roots of the standing tree. The air here felt charged, as though every breath drew in echoes of the thousands who had come before them. Moss-covered pillars, carved with motifs of birds in flight and waves of water, stood at regular intervals. Between them, shallow basins held rainwater that dripped from unseen crevices above, each drop sounding like a resonant bell in the hush. Corin stepped forward, his boots silent on the ancient flagstones. According to the scroll, there should be a second trial before one leaves the heart of the archive. He consulted his notebook by the light of Eloan's lantern. It spoke of the Guardian, a rite of passage for those who would carry the archive's flame back to the surface. We must prove ourselves worthy. Eloan's chest tightened as she recalled the Memory Keeper's riddle: seek the seed of remembrance, and the world may awaken. They had found the seed, awakened the archive, and woven their memories into its living tapestry, but what awaited was still unknown. What form does the trial take? She asked, voice soft. Corin tucked his notebook away. Here, he said, pointing to a carved relief on the wall, a tall, armored figure holding a staff topped with a glowing orb. Beneath, an inscription glimmered briefly before fading: he who dares to claim the light must face the Guardian's gaze and speak a truth unmasked. Eloan frowned. Speak a truth unmasked? Must we confess a secret? Her heart fluttered. She and Corin had shared many things, but there remained corners of their souls untouched by light. They proceeded down the vestibule until the corridor opened into a circular chamber dominated by a single statue carved from white marble. It depicted a formidable warrior wearing layered scale armor, a lion's head helm resting beside him at his feet. In his outstretched hand he held a spherical crystal that pulsed faintly with the same pale blue glow they had seen in the frescoes above. The statue's base was inscribed: here stands the Guardian, guide, judge, witness. Offer truth in the face of silence. Eloan stepped closer, her lantern illuminating the marble's smooth curves. Though the sculpture was motionless, she felt heat thrum through the crystal as though it sensed her presence. Corin touched the orb with reverence. Immediately, the glow intensified, flooding the chamber with a soft, azure light. Shadows retreated, and the air hummed with electricity. Suddenly, the chamber stilled. The humming ceased, and a low, sonorous voice neither entirely masculine nor feminine reverberated from the walls. Travelers who enter this sacred vault, you have awakened the archive and woven your memories into its heart. Before you depart, you must face the gaze of the Guardian and speak truth unmasked. Reveal a memory you have hidden even from yourselves, that the archive may hold it in trust. Eloan's breath caught. She exchanged a glance with Corin. The lantern's light trembled in her hand as she realized this trial demanded vulnerability, a willingness to unveil a hidden truth, a memory she might prefer remain buried. Corin's voice was steady. "I speak first." He closed his eyes and drew in a slow breath. "When I left home to pursue my studies in cartography, I abandoned my younger brother, Rowan, to care for our ailing mother alone. I made excuses not only to Rowan, but to myself, convincing myself that the archive and its mysteries were more important than family obligations. I have regretted that choice every day since." As he spoke, the crystal in the Guardian's hand glowed brighter, then dimmed slightly, as though weighing his confession. Eloan placed a gentle hand on his arm. "Thank you for your honesty," she whispered. Corin nodded, eyes moist. The voice spoke again, "The burden of regret lies heavy on your heart. May the archive's light grant you the grace to make amends." The crystal's glow softened, and the orb rotated within the statue's hand, shifting its angle toward Eloan. Eloan closed her eyes, heart pounding. She recalled a secret she had never told another soul, the night she discovered her father's journal, hidden among her grandmother's belongings. She had read its pages, intimate reflections of hope, fear, and a promise to protect Eloan at all costs, then locked it away again, ashamed that she had held his thoughts without his permission. That act of betrayal had lingered in her conscience, unspoken and unresolved. She inhaled, summoning courage. "Guardian," she began, voice barely above a whisper, "I confess that I once trespassed upon my father's privacy. When he fell ill, I found his personal journal and read it, hoping to find solace in his words. Instead, I discovered fears and vulnerabilities I was not prepared to bear. Ashamed of intruding, I hid the journal and never spoke of its contents. I have carried that guilt in silence, and I offer it now as truth." As Eloan spoke, the crystal's glow shifted in hue, deepening to a rich sapphire. The chamber seemed to exhale, the humming returning in a gentle wave that resonated deep within her bones. The marble armor on the statue's chest shimmered, and for an instant, the Guardian's eyes, crafted from faceted gems, gleamed with living light. "Your honesty frees you," the voice intoned. "Let the archive's memory be cleansed by truth. You have faced the Guardian's gaze. Go forth, bearing the archive's light into the world." The crystal's glow receded into a steady pulse, and the statue's aura dimmed to normal. Corin exhaled, wrapping an arm around Eloan's shoulders. "You were brave," he murmured. Eloan nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. "So were you." She felt a weight lift from her chest, as though confessing had unlocked a door in her heart. Together, they stepped away from the Guardian's statue. The vestibule lights returned to their mossy green glow, and the path ahead, previously obscured, was now bathed in subtle illumination. A broad stairway led upward, each tread etched with a word in the ancient script: honor, courage, compassion, wisdom, ascending until it opened into a final chamber. In that chamber, the ceiling yawned wide to reveal the star-speckled sky of early evening. Moonlight spilled through a circular opening, illuminating a small pool fed by an underground spring. Floating at its center was an ornate chalice fashioned from woven silver strands, whose lip was inlaid with the same star sapphires they had seen throughout the archive. Corin knelt to examine the chalice. "The final offering water of memory," he said reverently. "We must drink from it to seal our passage." Eloan bent to cup her hands into the pool. The water was cool and clear as liquid glass. She tasted it, traces of jasmine and honey lingering on her tongue. She smiled. To memory, and to new beginnings. Corin drank, then offered the chalice to Eloan. She sipped, feeling warmth ripple through her, as though the archive's light infused her very being. The sky above shimmered, and for a moment, the constellations rearranged into symbols of vines and stars, the same motifs they had encountered on stone and scroll. When the final drop passed her lips, Eloan felt a surge of connection to every memory held within the living archive, the hopes, fears, joys, and sorrows of countless souls. She opened her eyes to find Corin watching her, his expression one of wonder and solidarity. Together, hand in hand, they ascended the stairway back toward the surface, emerging from beneath the standing tree just as the first pale light of dawn crested the horizon. The sunflower plains greeted them in golden splendor, as if celebrating their victory. Eloan inhaled the fresh morning air, closing her eyes. The archive's light pulsed within her heart, a promise of stories yet to be told and mysteries yet to be unraveled. With Corin by her side, she felt ready to share this gift with the world, one memory at a time. Eloan Bradford stepped from the shadowed hollow beneath the standing tree into the golden sea of sunflowers, each bloom bowed in gentle greeting as the first rays of dawn unfurled across their faces. Corin stayed close at her side, his hand warm against hers, their footsteps light on the dewy grass. The vestibule's trials and the archive's glow still pulsed within their veins, and the world outside seemed both unchanged and profoundly different, every whisper of breeze and crackle of sunlight now resonating with the shared memory they carried. They paused at the crest of a small knoll, looking back at the ancient oak whose knotted roots sheltered the archive's secret heart. The tree's branches swayed, as if in benediction. Eloan drew a slow breath, tasting the sweetness of early morning, honeyed air from the blossoms, the tang of earth, and the faint trace of rosemary on her cloak. They had emerged triumphant, but a delicate tension lingered in her chest, an awareness that the archive's knowledge was a gift destined for more than just their own wonder. "We should return to Meadowmont," she said quietly. "The city must know what lies beneath these plains. The archive's light shouldn't remain hidden forever." Corin nodded, tracing a pattern in the grass with his boot. "Agreed. But we must be cautious." The memory keeper spoke of guardianship. "We cannot let greed or fear desecrate this place. We need allies, people we trust who will honor the archive's purpose." Eloan looked toward the distant spires of Meadowmont, pale against the pinkening sky. "I can think of no one more steadfast than Mrs. Dalrymple, the seamstress down the hall. She's wise beyond her years, and her heart is kind." She hesitated, then added, "And Raphael, the musician, he understands the language of song, much like the archive itself." Corin smiled, relief softened his features. "Then we shall seek them first." He reached into his pack and produced 2 small leather pouches, tokens of remembrance they had filled before the trials. Let's carry these as we journey back, so that, when the time is right, we may offer them as pledges of our stewardship. Eloan accepted the pouch he offered, tying its drawstring around her wrist. Inside lay a single sunflower seed harvested from the plains and a pinch of phosphorescent moss dust from the archive's algae gardens. A promise of growth and of memory, she murmured. They set off down the winding trail that led away from the sunflower plains and toward the city walls. Their path was bright under the ascending sun, but the corridor of tall grasses shifted with hidden currents of wind, so that every footstep felt both certain and strangely resonant. Along the way, Eloan paused to gather handfuls of golden petals, tucking them in the basket she slung across her shoulder, petals to preserve as a reminder of this day's marvel. About an hour later, the skyline of Meadowmont began to take shape, rooftops of red tiles and wrought iron balconies, the elegant curve of the city's aqueduct, and, beyond them, the lamplit archways of the eastern gate. As they descended the last hill, 2 familiar figures came into view, Raphael, violin tucked under his arm, and Mrs. Dalrymple, carrying a length of pale blue cloth as smooth as water. Eloan. Corin. Raphael called, hurrying forward. I heard the church bells ring for dawn, thought you might be returning. He stopped short, eyes widening as he saw the pouches tied to their wrists and the woven basket bulging with petals. What have you done? Mrs. Dalrymple approached more sedately, her gaze shifting between them like a soft breeze. You both look changed. As though you carry the weight of something vast. Eloan exchanged a glance with Corin, then drew both of them close enough that Raphael and Mrs. Dalrymple could see the morning light glinting on the rune-carved amulet at her throat. We have returned carrying the archive's flame, she said. Beneath the standing tree, we found an ancient repository of memory so old it predates our kingdom. We awakened it, wove our own truths into its tapestry, and faced its trials. Now we must share its wonder and protect it together. Raphael's mouth fell open. A repository of memory. You mean, like, everything that's happened in the Old Kingdom is kept there? He glanced at Mrs. Dalrymple. Is she mad? Mrs. Dalrymple's face softened with recognition. No, Raphael. I believe her. I have sensed a change in Eloan these past days, the way she speaks with a quiet certainty, the way her eyes reflect more than what lies before her. And Corin, your maps, perhaps, hold more than cartographic detail now. They carry echoes. Corin produced the small scroll from his pack, the one they had inscribed in the dais chamber. This scroll contains our contributions. The archive responded, allowing us to record our stories alongside those ancient truths. He handed it to Raphael, whose fingers trembled as he unrolled the parchment. The lettering shimmered in the sunlight, the runes tracing glowing paths between sentences in Eloan's elegant script. Read it, Corin urged softly. Raphael read aloud the lines they had written, his voice hushed. As he spoke, petals in the basket fluttered as though stirred by unseen wings, and a hush fell over the courtyard. When he finished, he rolled the scroll back up and handed it to Mrs. Dalrymple. She examined the seal of the memory keeper, a stylized quill and star, then looked up. This is genuine magic. The archive blesses your words and your honesty. We must form a circle of rememberers, she declared, her voice gentle but resolute. A group dedicated to caring for the archive's secret and deciding who may enter. Eloan's heart soared at her grandmotherly friend's approval. A circle of rememberers, she echoed. Yes. We will meet here at dawn each week, to share what we find, to guard this knowledge, and to ensure the archive's purpose to heal and to teach guides our actions. Raphael's face glowed with excitement. And I will compose music inspired by its wisdom. Songs that capture memory itself, so that even those who cannot journey beneath the plains may feel its power. Mrs. Dalrymple nodded. Good. Corin, map the way you must keep a precise chart of every marker. Eloan, press these petals in your journal as living proof of the sunflower's devotion. Raphael, begin your first composition. And I will draft our covenant-written pledges that bind us to secrecy, stewardship, and compassion. They formed a quiet circle in the shadow of the eastern gate, hands clasped around their tokens of remembrance. The morning sun rose higher, gilding the city in warmth. In that moment, Eloan felt the archive's light burn within her heart, a beacon not just of ancient memory, but of a community united by truth. When they finally dispersed to their homes, to their crafts, to their duties, each carried with them a piece of the archive's promise. Eloan climbed the narrow staircase to her attic study, heart pounding with purpose. She placed the sunflower petals between the pages of her leather-bound journal and penned the first lines of the covenant. We, the circle of rememberers, vow to honor the living archive, to hold its secrets with integrity, to weave our truths into its tapestry with humility, and to share its light with those whose hearts are ready to receive healing. May memory be our guide, and compassion our song. She sealed the journal with wax pressed with Mrs. Dalrymple's seal and tucked it safely on her shelf. Outside, Raphael's violin drifted across the rooftops as he practiced the first bars of his new melody. And in the courtyard below, Corin spread his maps on a wooden table, tracing the trail back to the standing tree with steady hands. Eloan paused at the window, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. The city lay bathed in morning glow, its people unaware of the ancient chamber beneath the plains that pulsed with memory. But Eloan and her circle would guard that secret, tending the archive's flame so that, one day, its wisdom might heal lands beyond Meadowmont. With a final glance at the rising sun, Eloan whispered to herself, "The journey continues and we are ready." Then she turned back to her desk, ready to write the next chapter of their shared story. The evening sun dipped low behind Meadowmont's rooftops, casting elongated shadows across the courtyard of the eastern gate. Lanterns flickered to life, their warm glow dancing upon the worn stones where Eloan Bradford, Corin Ravenscroft, Raphael Montague, and Mrs. Dalrymple had convened. Around a simple oak table, the 4 members of the newly formed Circle of Rememberers arranged their materials: Eloan's pressed sunflower petals and leather-bound covenant, Corin's meticulously annotated maps, Raphael's musical sketches, and Mrs. Dalrymple's parchment draft of the Circle's mission. Eloan took a measured breath, smoothing the front of her linen travel cloak before speaking. "Thank you all for coming. Tonight we formalize our vows, review what we've learned so far, and chart our next steps. This," she tapped the covenant parchment, "will bind us to secrecy, stewardship, and compassion." Mrs. Dalrymple stood and dipped her quill in ink. By the light of a single lantern, she read aloud the opening lines. "We, the Circle of Rememberers, guardians of the living archive, vow to hold its secrets with integrity, to weave our truths into its tapestry with humility, and to share its light only with those whose hearts are ready to receive healing." Each member, in turn, placed a fingertip on the wax seal and spoke their name, pledging to protect the archive. When Eloan pronounced her vow in a quiet, steady voice, she felt a surge of resolve, a bond forged in trust that would guide every decision from this night forward. Corin unrolled his map next. "The entrance at the standing tree is the portal we know, but my surveys suggest there are auxiliary passages, smaller, almost hidden corridors that branch off from the main chamber. Some may lead to storage rooms of artifacts or forgotten alcoves that hold something more." He traced a fine line through the sunflower plains, marking clusters of mossy stones and promising landmarks. "If we're to understand the archive's full scope, we must explore these side passages." Raphael leaned forward, clasping his sketchbook to his chest. "And I've been composing themes based on each chamber's resonance: the pool chamber's melodic echo, the guardian's trial's solemn refrain, the dais chamber's triumphant chant. I believe music can record what words alone cannot. With compositions tied to each location, we might attune our senses to shifts in the archive's energy, perhaps even reveal hidden entrances when the right melody is played." Mrs. Dalrymple nodded thoughtfully. "Music as a key, it fits. I will translate the runic inscriptions that correspond to each musical motif, pairing song with script so that future rememberers can navigate by both sound and text. But first, we must ensure our knowledge is organized. I propose we catalog every artifact and inscription we encounter in a shared ledger." Eloan raised her hand. "And I will compile our discoveries into a chronicle, an annotated journal bound alongside the covenant, so our successors know not only the path but the why behind each choice. We need context as much as coordinates." For a moment, the courtyard was silent except for the rustle of paper and the distant call of a night bird. Then Corin glanced up, eyes bright with cautious excitement. "There is one more matter. When we awakened the memory keeper, we saw only her initial riddle. The archive's scroll hinted at further guardianship, an entity called the Weaver of Echoes, who tests those who would claim the archive's deeper secrets. We have only passed the first trial. If our future explorations awaken the Weaver, we must be prepared." A hush fell. Raphael's brow furrowed. The Weaver of Echoes. I've never heard mention of that in the legends. What form might it take? MRS. Dalrymple folded her hands. Old whispered stories speak of a chamber where voices of the past converge, where one must listen not only with ears but with heart. The Weaver may present memories we did not live, requiring us to reconcile compassion for souls long gone. It may test our empathy rather than our honesty. Eloan leaned forward. Then our training cannot be limited to physical exploration. We must practice listening rituals of remembrance. Each week, before we depart into the plains, we gather here to share a story from our past, from another's past, and commemorate it with song and ink. We become stronger through empathy. Raphael nodded. I will compose a lament tonight for those we may encounter in the Weaver's Hall, a piece that honors life, loss, and the undying echo of human hope. Corin reached into his satchel and produced a small pouch of phosphorescent moss dust. And I have gathered more of the archive's moss to cultivate in the courtyard's basins. Its glow can mark the entrances to side passages at night. When the moss blossoms under lantern light, it will guide our path. MRS. Dalrymple produced a small vial of clear liquid water drawn from the memory spring, imbued with the archive's blessing. This water can consecrate our instruments' ink, paper, musical strings, so that each artifact we produce bears an imprint of the archive's light. It will remind us that we serve something greater than ourselves. Eloan closed her eyes for a moment, letting the weight and warmth of her friend's dedication fill her. When she opened them, her gaze was steady. Then it is settled. We meet here each dawn of the full moon, share our remembrances, and venture forth in pairs to explore the hidden corridors. Corin and I will map the northern passages, Raphael and MRS. Dalrymple will translate and compose in the southern chambers. We record, we honor, and we protect. Raphael rose to his feet, offering his hand to Eloan. To the circle of rememberers may our hearts remain open, and our memories true. One by one, they clasped hands. In the lantern light, their joined palms glowed faintly, as though the archive itself approved. The oath had woven them together into a fellowship bound by secrets and song, their fates intertwined with the living memory beneath the sunflowers. As they dispersed into the quiet streets, Eloan to her attic study, Corin to his map room, Raphael to the music hall, and MRS. Dalrymple to her sewing nook, each carried a fragment of the evening's resolve. The city slumbered, unaware that beneath its foundation lay a secret world of stone and song, guarded by 4 hearts steadfast in honesty and compassion. That night, Eloan sat at her desk by candlelight. She opened her journal to a blank page and pressed the sunflower petals she had collected, then wrote. In the first council of rememberers, we pledged our memories and formed our fellowship. We mapped, we composed, we translated, and we consecrated our tools. We prepared our souls for trials not yet faced. In the weaving of our truths, we bind the archive's light to the promise of tomorrow. When the ink dried, She set down her quill and gazed at the stars beyond her window. For the first time since the days beneath the standing tree, she felt the archives echo in her own heartbeat and knew that whatever awaited, she and her circle would face it together. As the moon reached its zenith, silver light spilled across Meadowmont's courtyards and streets. At the eastern gate, the phosphorescent moss glowed softly, marking the hidden southern entrance that Raphael and Mrs. Dalrymple had uncovered. Eloan and Corin were away mapping the northern side passages, leaving Raphael Montague and Helena Dalrymple, now formally known as Mrs. Dalrymple, alone in their vigil. Raphael tightened the straps on his leather satchel, which held his violin case and a small collection of musical parchments. Helena secured her long cloak, ensuring her quill and translation manuscripts were tucked safely inside her satchel's pockets. Together, they stepped through the archway beneath the gate, pausing only for a moment to feel the hush of the night air before sliding aside the moss-draped stones that concealed the southern stair. The steps descended swiftly into darkness. Raphael struck a slender piece of flint against steel, sparking a small fire-steel torch that illuminated damp, uneven stone beneath their feet. Tiny rivulets of water traced channels through the walls, and the air smelled of earth, lichen, and something sweet like a distant wisp of honeyed jasmine. "It's quieter here," Raphael whispered, his breath echoing. The northern passages hummed with energy, but this feels contemplative. Helena nodded, tracing her fingers along the carved mossy capitals of the pillars. "These carvings are different, flowing musical notes entwined with vine motifs. See here." She swept her torch across the wall to reveal a bas-relief, a pair of hands cupping a lyre, its strings rendered in delicate filigree. Raphael's eyes lit up. "A song chamber, perhaps. If we play the right melody, we might unlock its secrets." He lifted his violin with a soft exhale, cradling it in his arms. They proceeded down the corridor until they entered a broad, domed hall whose ceiling soared 20 feet above. The torchlight revealed mosaic tiles underfoot, a vast circular disc of mother-of-pearl and dark stone, depicting a spiral of notes winding inward toward a central pool. At the pool's edge, water lay so still it mirrored the lantern's flames, making the chamber feel as though it held a second, inverted sky. Helena approached the pool. "This must be the Hall of Echoes that the Weaver of Echoes guards." The scroll mentioned a place where voices converge. "This seems likely." She knelt to inspect the mosaic, her quill tapping notes in a small sketchbook. "The spiral of notes, it may be a guide to the melody we must play." Raphael stepped onto the mosaic, feeling the cool tile under his boots. He closed his eyes and listened, the faint drip of water from above, the slow hiss of moss breathing, and beneath it all, a distant choral hum. He opened his satchel and withdrew the sheet music inspired by the first chamber's resonances, the pool chant, Guardian's refrain, and Deus motet. With trembling fingers, he strung his violin with a fresh set of phosphorescent strings gifted by Corin, infused with the memory spring water to carry memory's echo. "Which melody first?" he asked, voice soft. Helena consulted her notes. The pool song was a gentle chord progression, ACE over a sustained drone. It felt like an invitation rather than a command. "Begin there," She knelt by a small inscription at the pool's lip, brushing away moss to reveal runes spelling out a lyrical phrase in the old tongue, "Let the circle of song awaken the silent deep." Raphael nodded and raised his bow. He began with a single, trembling A-string note, letting it fully resonate before moving to C, then A. The cave-like hall absorbed the sound, then returned it multiplied 1,000 tiny echoes swirling around them like dancing motes of light. Encouraged, Raphael wove the 3 notes into a simple arpeggio, then repeated it, each pass growing richer, the echoes weaving into harmonies that seemed to press against the walls in pleasure. As he played, the pool's surface shimmered. Tiny waves spread outward, carrying phosphorescent tendrils of algae that glowed aquamarine. The mosaic spiral lit up in concentric rings, each tile flickering in turn white mother of pearl glowing like fresh letter forms in a sacred text. Eloan and Corin's trials had awakened the archive. Now, Raphael's music coaxed its southern heart to life. The echoes coalesced into a soft chorus of voices rising from the water, singing in that same ancient melodic runic speech. The language was not one human spoke but one memory intoned, a sound felt more deeply than heard. Helena closed her eyes, letting the words wash over her. Though she could not translate every syllable, she caught fragments: remember, heal, unite. When the last chord faded, Raphael let the bow rest on his shoulder. The pool's waters stilled, then rose in a gentle arc that glittered like a rain of stars. At its center, the water formed a transparent orb hovering above the surface, an echo of the memory keeper's crystal but crafted from living water. Helena moved forward, gently cupping her hands beneath the orb. Its surface rippled, releasing a silver mist that drifted upward, settling onto her quill, her parchment, and even Raphael's violin. As the mist touched each object, runic symbols glowed on them, tiny letters of the archive's script, marking their tools as consecrated and linked to memory's song. The orb descended back into the pool, its glow lingering in the water's depths. Raphael exhaled, eyes shining with wonder. That was beyond anything I could have imagined. Helena dipped her quill into the still water, then touched its tip to her translation manuscript, where the runes took shape in ink that shimmered faintly. I've captured fragments of the chorus. We must bring these back for Corin and Eloan so they, too, may learn the weaver's song. Raphael knelt by the pool's edge, plucking the phosphorescent algae to slip into a small vial. This moss will mark the weaver's hall when we return in daylight. Its glow under the moon will guide our steps. They fell silent in the luminous hall, letting the archive's southern heart pulse within them. Outside, the night air pressed against the stone, but within, memory and music had fused, weaving a tapestry of sound and light. Carefully, Raphael rewrapped his violin in its case and Helena stashed her parchment. Together, they retraced their steps up the stairwell, carrying with them the consecrated tools and algae samples. As they emerged into the moonlit courtyard, the phosphorescent moss on the eastern gate shimmered, welcoming them back. Raphael turned to Helena. We've awakened another chamber and begun to learn the weaver's song. But we still have much to do before we can face that trial. Helena nodded. We must study these translations, practice the melody, and prepare our hearts for the empathy the weaver demands. Until then, let us rest and ready ourselves for dawn. Under the watchful gaze of the moon, they departed silently, each step a promise to safeguard the song of memory and share its echoes with those who would listen with compassion and courage. Dawn's pale light filtered through the high windows of the city archive in Meadowmont as Eloan Bradford and Corin Ravenscroft gathered their gear for the day's expedition. The phosphorescent moss vials slung at their belts glimmered faintly in the light, and their maps freshly annotated by Corin lay rolled inside waxed leather tubes. Today they would venture into the northern passages, the lesser-known corridors branching off from the dais chamber, where Corin suspected relics of the Old Kingdom's original archives awaited. Rediscovery. Eloan tucked her journal into her satchel, fastening the straps securely. "Are you certain the marker leads us beneath the old quarry?" she asked, scanning Corin's detailed sketch of the route. He nodded with a surge of excitement. "It aligns with the limestone seam visible at the quarry's edge. If we follow that shaft downward, we should emerge in the vault of cartography, the chamber where ancient map makers recorded the realm's shifting borders and ley lines." He lifted his lantern, the flame steady. "Ready?" She smiled, fingers brushing the silver locket at her throat, the same one that seemed to pulse whenever the archive guided her. "Always." They crossed the city beneath ambling heralds of dawn, slipping past early street sweepers and sun-bleached banners draped between wrought iron lamp posts. The eastern gate stood silent behind them. They skirted the palace moat and turned north, along a narrow lane whose cobblestones rattled underfoot. Soon the ancient quarry walls loomed, a rough semicircle of white stone, now overgrown with ivy and broken columns. Corin paused at the cliff's edge, consulting his compass. "Here. See the carved notch in the rock face?" He pointed to a weather-worn glyph depicting a stylized globe and quill. "We should find a hidden latch beneath that vine." Eloan knelt and brushed aside ivy tendrils, revealing a small bronze lever recessed into the limestone. She pulled it, the rock slid aside with a low rumble, exposing a narrow staircase hewn directly into the quarry wall. A cool draft wafted out, carrying the scent of earth and old ink. They descended slowly, lanterns bobbing. Each step was carved irregularly, worn smooth by centuries of passage. Moss clung to the walls, its phosphorescent clusters lending a gentle green glow alongside the lantern's golden beam. Carved markers, arrows, coordinates, and star symbols guided their way until finally they arrived at a vaulted doorway sealed by iron-bound oak. Corin laid a hand on the door's surface. "This must be it, the vault of cartography." He produced a brass key, one of 3 they had retrieved from the dais chamber's offerings, and inserted it into the lock. With a satisfying click, the door swung inward on ancient hinges. The vault's interior was an astonishing sight. A semi-circular hall lined with tall wooden cases stretched before them, each case built into the rock wall and sealed by carved doors inlaid with mother-of-pearl. The center of the chamber held a round stone table, its top engraved with the kingdom's coastline and the great mountain ranges that divided north from south. Flickering lantern light played across the carved relief, revealing fine lines that delineated rivers, roads, and ley lines once believed to channel magical energies. Eloan inhaled sharply. They preserved the world's shape in stone and ink. Corin moved along the cases, illuminating their labels in runic script. Atlas of the Four Winds, he read. Codex of Lunar Bearings. Chart of the Sunflower Lay. Each volume promised lost knowledge, maps that showed how ancient travelers navigated by starlight, trails long since overgrown, and sites of power where the land itself remembered magic. Eloan approached the stone table, tracing one of the carved roads with her fingertip. She felt a faint vibration, a memory echo of countless footsteps that had followed these paths long ago. She retrieved her journal and sketched the map's central portion, careful to capture each detail. As she worked, she detected a slight hollow resonance beneath the table's surface. Corin crouched beside a carved etch. "Here, push against this spoked wheel." He pressed, and part of the table rotated inward, revealing a hidden compartment beneath. Inside lay a small, weathered scroll tied with a ribbon of silver thread. With reverent care, Eloan lifted the scroll. The parchment crackled softly as she untied the ribbon and unrolled it. Faded ink formed an intricate map overlay, a chart of secret chambers and side passages beyond even the vault's known corridors, including one marked only by a single rune, an eye within a compass rose. Corin's eyes gleamed. This is the cartographer's secret, a hidden network of memory vaults, each dedicated to an aspect of the kingdom's heritage, art, law, ritual, and spirit. We've only scratched the surface. He reached for a case labeled Compendium of Ritual Sites and pried it open, revealing a leather-bound tome. Eloan took it into her hands, fingers trembling as she felt the embossed cover's texture. They settled by the central table, lanterns arranged to cast overlapping cones of light. Eloan opened the compendium to the first page, where a finely penned inscription read, "To those who seek the story of our realm, know that every path drawn is a promise of memory. Illuminate the hidden way, and the tapestry of our past shall guide the present." She studied the accompanying diagram, a series of concentric circles, each marked with symbols for water, stone, flame, and wind elements woven into rituals once performed at sacred sites. The running commentary described how map makers recorded not just geography but ceremonial journeys, ensuring that future generations could walk the land with reverence. Eloan glanced at Corin, heart pounding. If we follow these directions, we might discover the ritual vault, an archive of ceremonies that bound the kingdom together. Corin nodded, carefully rolling the scroll and placing it in his pack. "We need to share this with the circle and decide which vault to explore next. But first, let's secure this terraced hall. We can cultivate the moss along the carvings so that, when we return after dark, the glyphs will glow and guide our path." They set to work. Corin sprinkled phosphorescent moss spores along carved aisles, while Eloan pressed fragments of map into her journal and made precise notes in the margins. Hours passed in silence, broken only by the rustle of parchment and the occasional soft drip of water echoing through the chamber. At last, their task complete, they locked the cases, Ressa led the stone table's hatch, and replaced the vault door's key. As they climbed the staircase back toward the quarry's mouth, Corin paused on a landing to study the hidden scroll's ribbon of silver thread. "Eloan," he whispered, "this ribbon might be more than mere decoration. It could mark a binding ritual, something that ties the scroll's power to those who read it. We should consider what offering or memory we must present to fully unlock the cartographer's secret. Eloan nodded, pulling her journal close. Agreed. Tonight, by our council, we will decide which memory to share. She pressed her thumb to the silver thread and felt a warm pulse beneath the stone, a reminder that every scroll, every map, was alive with remembrance. Emerging into the morning light, they paused at the quarry's edge, breathing in the crisp air. Meadowmont lay before them like a model globe, ready to be mapped anew by keepers of memory. Eloan smiled at Corin. Our story grows richer, she said softly. And the archive's heart beats stronger. He returned her smile, lantern in one hand and journal in the other. Onward, archivist. The world still awaits our discovery. Together, they retraced their steps through the city, ready to present the cartographer's secret to their circle and plan the next voyage into the labyrinth of living memory. 3 nights had passed since Eloan and Corin uncovered the cartographer's secret within the northern vault. Now, the 4 members of the Circle of Rememberers, Eloan, Corin, Raphael, and Helena Dalrymple, gathered once more beneath the stained glass dome of Raphael's family conservatory. Moonlight filtered through panes of sapphire and rose, casting a kaleidoscope of color over their table, where scrolls, musical staves, and ritual diagrams lay spread in organized chaos. A fire crackled gently in the marble hearth. Outside, wind whistled through the alleyways of Meadowmont, but within the conservatory, the circle held council. Eloan stood, holding the scroll they had unearthed beneath the quarry. This, she said, unrolling the parchment so the silver-threaded ribbon shimmered in the candlelight, is the key to the ritual vault, hidden beyond even the mapmaker's charts. And according to the inscription, she pointed to the runes at the bottom, we must each contribute a memory tied to the elements. 1 for stone, 1 for flame, 1 for water, and 1 for air. Corin added, it's not simply ceremonial. These memories must be deeply personal, offerings to unlock the vault's 4 seals. Raphael leaned forward, fingers steepled beneath his chin. Then we each offer 1. We divide by element, each of us holds a fragment that complements the whole. Helena nodded. But this means splitting up. We must journey to the elemental sites tied to each seal. They're scattered, some beyond the city walls, others hidden in plain sight beneath the city's ancient layers. Silence fell for a moment as the weight of the plan settled over them. Eloan spoke first. I'll take stone. The ritual codex describes a cavern beneath the old bell tower, where the first masons carved their names into the bedrock. I remember sitting at my father's feet as he told stories of builders who laid foundations not only of stone, but of faith. That memory. I'm ready to offer it. Raphael lifted his hand. Then I will take air. There's an abandoned cloister on the cliffs of Windmere, where musicians once composed for the wind itself. My mother took me there before she left. She said the wind would carry her lullabies to me. That's the memory I'll give. Corin spoke next. I'll journey to the southern fire fields and offer flame. When I was young, I watched the library fire destroy everything I thought I was. But that loss made me a seeker, not a scholar. I'll give that grief and the hope that came after. Helena, voice soft, completed the circle. I'll offer water. In the marshes of Meyer Brook lies the shrine of reflection. I lost my son there, or thought I had. When he was found days later, soaked but alive, it was like the water had spared him. That moment, both terror and relief, I will place it into the archive's keeping. The four of them stood in silence, connected by something older than blood, older than oath, memory woven with purpose. They agreed to depart the next dawn, each traveling to their chosen elemental site, to offer their memory at the sacred seal, and to return by the next full moon. Eloan packed lightly, her journal, a compass, a shard of limestone from the vault of cartography, and the silver-threaded scroll that would unite their memories once all four were bound. She set out toward the old bell tower, nestled deep in the heart of Meadowmont, long sealed and rarely visited. The path wound through ivy-laced courtyards and under forgotten archways. At its base, she found a carved sigil Corin had marked, a spiral with 4 branching lines, one for each element. She pressed her palm against it and whispered the words of passage. Stone, bearer of legacy, open thy gate to memory. The door groaned open, and she descended into the dark. The cavern beneath the bell tower was cold and echoing, lined with names etched into the stone by masons long gone. She found the central chamber easily, a domed hollow, lit by a shaft of light from above that struck a stone pedestal in the center. On it sat a shallow bowl of granite, worn smooth by time. Eloan knelt before it, unrolling the scroll and holding it over the bowl. I offer a memory of creation, she said quietly. Of my father's voice telling me how foundations are laid not only with mortar but with hope. I offer the echo of his laughter as I tried to stack stones higher than my arms could reach. I offer the feeling of his hand guiding mine as I wrote my name for the first time. The bowl glowed faintly. A hum filled the cavern, low and steady like the voice of the mountain itself. The scroll shimmered, one corner glowing with runes representing stone. The pedestal trembled slightly, and a line of light shot from the bowl to the ceiling, where a small carving of a mountain ridge now glowed with golden light. Eloan staggered back, heart pounding. It had accepted her offering. In Windmere, Raphael climbed the windswept cliffs, violin slung over his back. He knelt in the cloister of echoes, whispering lullabies and tears into the open sky, his song carried away by gusts that wept and laughed in equal measure. In Meyer Brook, Helena stood in knee-deep water, her eyes closed as her trembling hands placed a lock of her son's childhood hair into the shrine's mirrored basin. She wept, not just in sadness, but in reverence. And in the fire fields, Corin faced the scorched earth and held his burned journal over the fire altar. He dropped it in, and with it, the last remnant of the self he had once mourned. In its place, he found clarity. When they returned, each carried a mark upon their skin, a glowing glyph in the shape of their chosen element, etched like a birthright over their heart. The scroll when placed in the center of the circle's table flared with light, absorbing each seal and transforming into a four-fold sigil. The circle had completed the offering. Now the path to the ritual vault would open. But what lay beyond would test them more than any passage, puzzle, or trial before. For the vault did not hold only rituals and forgotten ceremonies, it held the first memory, the origin of the archive itself. And in that memory, a truth had been sealed, one powerful enough to fracture kingdoms and mend them anew. The next journey would not be of maps or melodies but of what it meant to remember everything. Rain fell in a fine silver mist as the circle of rememberers gathered once again beneath the standing tree, its sprawling branches glistening with dew. The scent of moss and distant lightning filled the air. Each of them, Eloan, Corin, Raphael, and Helena, wore their journey like a second skin, eyes sharpened by revelation, shoulders set with new weight. The four elemental sigils, now faintly glowing on their chests, pulsed in synchrony as if the archive itself had stitched them together across space and memory. In Eloan's satchel, the once muted scroll now irradiated with soft light, the four elemental seals along its edges forming a completed circle. When she unrolled it at the base of the tree, the air shifted, thickened as though the roots themselves leaned forward to listen. At the scroll's center, a new rune had appeared. Unlike the other symbols, stone, flame, water, air, this one resembled an eye split by a spiral, the sigil of origin. "It's changed," whispered Raphael, the rain glinting in his dark curls. "That wasn't there before." "It's a fifth seal," Helena murmured, brushing her fingers across the parchment. "Not of element, but of time." Corin nodded. "The archive has accepted our offerings. And now it invites us to unlock its final truth, the beginning of the archive itself." He pointed to a passage that shimmered faintly in the runic script. "Return to the place where memory began. Speak not a name, but a silence. Bring not fire, but breath. Bring not offerings, but yourselves." Eloan's breath caught. "We're the final key." They descended once more into the archive through the passage beneath the standing tree. The chambers they passed, pool of echoes, guardian's trial, the dais chamber, were now lit with a steady inner light, awakened by their past journeys. The archive recognized them, welcomed them. At the far end of the vault of cartography, where they had once discovered the hidden scroll, Corin paused before a wall they had previously marked as solid. The glowing sigils on their chests pulsed in harmony, and with a low grinding sound, the stone wall split into two vertical doors, revealing a narrow stair spiraling deep into the bedrock. The stair was different, older. Not cut by tools but shaped, almost grown, as though the stone had formed itself into this descent. Runes were carved here too, but faint and wild, flowing not in lines but in arcs and whirls like ancient winds had etched them with their breath. At the bottom of the staircase, they emerged into a vast, spherical chamber. The Vault of Origins. There was no light source, yet the chamber glowed, its walls slick with pale memory light. It felt neither warm nor cold, but familiar. In the center of the chamber floated a single object, a crystalline orb suspended by invisible threads. Within it shimmered an impossible image: clouds, stars, and shifting faces from all ages, a mosaic of lives and deaths and dreams. They approached slowly. As they neared, the orb pulsed, and a voice, not a sound, but a sensation, filled the chamber. Who speaks without words? Eloin stepped forward. We do. Who remembers what was never told? Raphael took a breath. We do. Who binds the broken with what cannot be held? Helena raised her hand. We do. Who dares to carry the first memory? Corin stepped beside them. We do. The orb shimmered once, and then, like water breaking, it opened. Inside was no grand display of relics or tomes. There were no scrolls or carvings. Only a vast emptiness. A silence so deep that even thought became a whisper. And in that stillness, memories began to pour into them, not from without, but from within. Eloin staggered as her mind was flooded with sensations she'd never known, of people long gone, lives she had not lived. A girl running barefoot across a desert of glass, humming to the wind. A boy carving the first song into bark with a broken shell. A parent whispering lullabies before language had names. She clutched her journal as it lit from within, glowing with writing she had never penned but now recognized, stories that had always been hers, waiting for her to remember. Corin dropped to one knee, hand clutching his temple, eyes wide. It's the memory of the world itself, he gasped. Not history. Origin. The vault was showing them the truth. Before the archive was carved in stone, it was carried in voices, passed hand to hand through fire, light, and breath. It lived in lullabies and rituals, in scars and dances, in death songs and first cries. The archive had been born not in walls but in witnessing. And humanity had forgotten. The voice returned. Not a question this time, but a quiet statement that echoed across every wall, every chamber of their being. To carry the first memory is to carry all things. Not knowledge. Not power. But remembrance, the weight of the forgotten. Do you accept this burden? Eloin stepped forward. Her voice was soft, but unwavering. I do. The crystal pulsed. Light poured outward, not blinding, but warm, steady, like sunrise on winter soil. The glyphs on their chests burned gold before slowly fading, absorbed into their very skin. Each of them received something different. Eloin's journal, now rewritten in flowing script from 100 voices, contained a map of the unseen stories, the ones untold, the ones deliberately erased. Corin's compass, once cracked, now pointed not north, but toward need, to places where memory had fractured and called out to be mended. Raphael's violin, when he drew his bow, played memory itself, melodies from the forgotten, harmonies from the unborn. And Helena's quill wrote in dual ink, one line from the present, one line from the past, tracing the emotional lineage of every name it recorded. When the light dimmed, the crystal orb had vanished. In its place hovered a single phrase etched in the air like mist: guard it. Share it. Never own it. They stood in silence for a long time. Then, wordlessly, they turned and climbed the stairs, back through the archive's hallowed paths, emerging once more beneath the standing tree, its leaves now glowing with faint light, as if the roots had heard everything. That evening, back in the conservatory, the circle sat together in the quiet glow of lanterns. No one spoke at first. There were no oaths to recite, no rituals to perform. At last, Eloan opened her new journal and placed it on the table. From now on, she said, we record not just what we find. We record what the world has forgotten. Corin unfurled his compass. And we go wherever memory is most fragile. Raphael tuned his violin and let the first notes fall soft, aching, beautiful. Helena began to write, her dual script flowing in perfect rhythm, each stroke a thread between then and now. The vault of origins had changed them. They were no longer just rememberers. They were weavers of memory. And the archive, awakened in full, pulsed beneath their feet with quiet gratitude. For the first time in ages, it was no longer alone. The first light of dawn painted Meadowmont's skyline in soft hues of rose and gold, spilling through the tall windows of Eloan's attic study. The air was cool but alive with promise, the quiet hum of a city waking slowly from slumber. Eloan sat at her desk, fingers poised over her leather-bound journal, now shimmering faintly with the many voices of memory she and the circle had recently woven into the living archive. Beside her, Corin laid out the newest maps, their edges gilded with the silver dust of the phosphorescent moss that seemed to breathe faintly under the lamplight. Raphael tuned his violin with meticulous care, the strings gleaming as if kissed by starlight. Helena arranged her inks and papers, the dual script quill ready to capture whatever stories awaited. Today was no ordinary day. It marked the beginning of their new mission, to seek out the threads of forgotten tales, the scattered fragments of stories lost to time, hidden in whispers, in shadowed glens, and in hearts long silent. They would follow the compass of memory, guided by the archive's pulse, to reunite these threads and restore the tapestry of the kingdom's true history. Eloan glanced at the map Corin had drawn, the first of many marked with a constellation of locations: an abandoned chapel beneath the Vale Wood, a sunken ruin on the shore of Silver Lake, a forgotten cabin deep in the Ember Wilds. Each place held a shard of story, waiting to be found. She cleared her throat softly. Our first thread lies at the chapel of Vale Wood. According to the archive, it was once a sanctuary for storytellers and memory keepers until the Great Silence swept the land. The last tale told there was lost, but the echoes remain. Raphael's eyes sparkled. I've composed a melody inspired by the archive song of Valewood, a haunting motif meant to awaken the sleeping echoes. Helena nodded. I've translated fragments of a chronicle found in the ritual vault that mention a keeper of the last tale, a figure who vanished after the silence. Perhaps their story lingers there. Corin folded the map and slung it over his shoulder. Then we depart at first light. We move as one, but each of us brings our own strength to the search. Remember, the archive is with us not just in spirit, but in every heartbeat. The circle gathered their packs, the weight of purpose steady upon their backs. As they stepped into the awakening streets of Meadowmont, the sun broke over the horizon, a new dawn not just for the city, but for the very fabric of memory itself. And thus began their journey to gather the lost stories, to weave the threads of forgotten tales back into the living heart of the archive, and to stand as guardians of a past reclaimed for the future. The journey to the chapel of Valewood led the circle through tangled groves where light filtered faintly through ancient branches, casting mottled shadows on the mossy earth. The trees whispered secrets on the breeze, leaves rustling with echoes of forgotten stories and unspoken sorrows. Eloan walked beside Corin, her fingers brushing against the bark of a towering oak, feeling the pulse of life beneath its rough skin. As they approached the chapel's ruins, a crumbling stone structure embraced by ivy and wildflowers, the air grew thick with memory. Raphael lifted his violin, the melody he'd composed for Valewood filling the stillness with haunting notes that seemed to awaken the very stones. Within the chapel, they found traces of the last tale, charred pages in the rubble, faint inscriptions on faded tapestries, and a small wooden box carved with symbols of song and silence. Helena carefully opened the box, revealing a delicate silver pendant entwined with a single black feather, the mark of the vanished keeper. Eloan held the pendant, sensing a connection that transcended time. "This keeper story is our next thread," she said softly. "We must follow where it leads to reclaim the tale and bring light to the silence." The circle pledged to honor this mission, knowing the path ahead would test their courage and their bond as guardians of memory. Together, they stepped into the shadows of the whispering woods, ready to listen to the stories waiting patiently in the silence. The whispering wood stretched endlessly before them, its dense canopy filtering the sunlight into soft green hues that danced on the forest floor. Every step Eloan, Corin, Raphael, and Helena took was met with the subtle chorus of rustling leaves, distant bird calls, and the faint murmurs of voices carried on the breeze, echoes of the past. Waiting to be heard. Eloan clutched the silver pendant tightly, its black feather gently brushing against her palm as if alive. "This belonged to the keeper who vanished after the great silence," she whispered. "If we can find where they went, perhaps we can uncover the last tale and restore the voice lost to time." Corin unfolded the ancient scroll they'd recovered, tracing the faded ink lines that mapped a path deeper into the woods, toward a forgotten glade known only in whispered legend as the Heart of Memory. Raphael tuned his violin, fingers steady despite the weight of the journey. "Music will guide us through this place, weaving our steps with the forest's song." Helena held her translation manuscripts close. "And I will listen for any clues in the murmurs the forest remembers." As the circle pressed forward, the wood seemed to respond, branches parting gently, shadows retreating, and a gentle breeze leading them ever closer to the keeper's resting place. Here, in the quiet sanctuary beneath ancient trees, they would face their greatest challenge yet, to unravel the final thread of the archive's tapestry and breathe life into the stories lost to silence. Deep within the whispering woods, the circle of rememberers tread carefully toward the glade known as the Heart of Memory. The air here was thick with the scent of damp earth and blooming night flowers, and a subtle hum seemed to vibrate through the ancient trees, as though the very forest held its breath. Eloan led the way, the silver pendant swinging gently from her neck, casting soft reflections on the mossy ground. The black feather embedded in the pendant seemed to pulse in time with her heartbeat, as if guiding her steps. As they entered the glade, a clearing bathed in moonlight awaited them. In its center stood a weathered stone pedestal, upon which rested an intricately carved wooden chest bound with iron clasps etched with runes of protection. Around the pedestal, ancient stones formed a circle, their surfaces inscribed with symbols representing memory, loss, and rebirth. Helena approached cautiously, brushing away leaves and moss to reveal a shallow basin carved into the pedestal's surface. She knelt and began to chant softly, invoking the ancient words they had learned from the ritual vault. The basin began to fill with crystal clear water, shimmering with an ethereal light. Raphael lifted his violin and began to play a haunting melody composed to awaken slumbering memories. The notes wove through the trees, stirring the forest as whispers grew into voices, echoes of the stories the keeper had tried to preserve. Eloan stepped forward and, with reverence, lifted the chest's lid. Inside lay scrolls, letters, and artifacts, fragments of the last tale. As she unrolled the oldest scroll, words written in flowing script glowed softly, revealing the story of a keeper who had sacrificed everything to protect the archive from the great silence. Moved by the tale, the circle vowed to honor the keeper's sacrifice and ensure that no memory would ever be lost again. With the chest's contents safely gathered, they prepared to return to Meadowmont, their hearts heavy with the weight of history but filled with renewed purpose. As they left the glade, the forest seemed to exhale, the whispers fading into a peaceful silence. The circle knew their journey was far from over, but the heart of memory had revealed its secret, lighting their path forward in the endless weave of the living archive. The days following their discovery at the heart of memory unfolded in a whirl of activity. The circle of rememberers returned to Meadowmont bearing the keeper's chest and its precious contents, ancient scrolls, brittle letters, and artifacts imbued with the weight of sacrifice and hope. Within the stone halls of the living archive, beneath the venerable standing tree, they laid these treasures upon the oak table where their covenant rested, letting the memories seep into the archive's living essence. Yet, as the archive blossomed with newfound truths, a shadow stirred beyond the city's borders. Whispers traveled on the wind, rumors of those who sought to control the archive's power, to twist memory for their own gain. The balance between remembrance and oblivion had become a delicate thread, one the circle would soon find tested by forces both seen and unseen. One evening, as a storm gathered over Meadowmont, lightning jagged across the sky, and rain pelted the ancient rooftops, the circle convened in the conservatory, its glass panes rattling with the tempest's fury. Eloan's gaze was steely, reflecting the flickering candlelight and the storm's wild dance. "We've done more than uncover history," she said. "We've become its guardians, and with that comes responsibility. The stories we protect are vulnerable, and others know it." Corin nodded, tracing the path of a map that showed the shifting boundaries of their realm. "The archive is awakening, and so are those who fear it. Our enemies are cunning shadowed figures who traffic in lies and half-truths, seeking to erase or rewrite what we hold sacred." Helena spoke quietly, her hands resting on the translated scripts of the ritual vault. We must strengthen the circle. Trust alone will not shield us from the coming storm. We need allies, keepers of other kinds of memory, artisans, scholars, even the common folk whose daily lives carry the pulse of the past. Raphael's fingers brushed his violin strings absently, eyes distant. And we must prepare to fight not with sword or shield, but with story and song. Memory is a weapon as sharp as any blade, and if we wield it well, it can cut through the darkest lies. A sudden crack of thunder shook the room, silencing their words. Outside, the wind howled like a beast unleashed, rattling the doors and casting shadows that flickered like specters. Eloan rose, pacing the length of the chamber. Our next steps are clear. We gather the scattered threads of the archive, build our fellowship beyond this circle, and stand ready to defend the truth. The archive must remain a sanctuary untouched by the greed of those who would corrupt it. The storm raged through the night, mirroring the turmoil in their hearts. But as dawn's first light pierced the heavy clouds, the circle emerged with renewed resolve. In the days to come, Eloan would reach out to the elders of Meadowmont, seeking those who held the oral histories and folk wisdom passed through generations. Corin would chart secret paths to distant libraries and hermitages, places untouched by time's decay. Raphael's melodies would weave through taverns and marketplaces, carrying encoded stories meant to inspire and protect. Hellenist translations would unlock the mysteries of the ritual vault, guiding the circle in ceremonies to bind and shield the archive's power. Together, they would face the gathering storm, a tempest of shadow and memory, truth and deceit. And in their unity, they would kindle a light fierce enough to withstand the darkness. As the sun rose higher, breaking through silvered skies, Eloan stood beneath the standing tree, fingers tracing the runes carved into its bark. The living archive pulsed in response, a heartbeat shared between past and present, waiting for the next chapter to be written. And so, the journey continued, uncharted, perilous, and filled with the promise that memory, when held with courage and compassion, could change the world. The sun had just begun to set over Meadowmont, painting the sky in shades of orange and violet, when an urgent message arrived at the conservatory. A courier, breathless and rain-soaked from the evening storm, handed Eloan a folded parchment sealed with the crest of a neighboring town, Havenbrook. Eloan's eyes scanned the letter quickly, then narrowed. "There's unrest in Havenbrook," she announced to the circle gathered around the oak table. "They've reported strange occurrences near the old sanctuary, visions, inexplicable disappearances, and whispers of forbidden knowledge." Corin's jaw tightened. The archive's power is drawing attention beyond Meadowmont. If these shadows reach Havenbrook, the threat is no longer distant, it's at our doorstep. Raphael's fingers trembled on his violin case. "We must act swiftly, before fear turns to chaos." Helena unfolded maps and charts, marking the route to Havenbrook. The old sanctuary was once a sister site to the standing tree, holding relics and memories of its own. If corrupted, it could unravel the delicate balance we've fought to restore. Eloan looked around the room, meeting each determined gaze. "We go at first light." We must protect the archive's kin and confront whatever darkness threatens the memory we cherish. The storm outside had passed, but inside, the air was thick with resolve. The circle prepared for a journey into the unknown, their bonds forged by shared purpose and the unyielding belief that memory was a light no shadow could extinguish. As dawn broke, they set forth ready to face the rising tide of darkness, their hearts united in the eternal quest to remember, to protect, and to endure. The journey to Haven Brook was unlike any the circle of rememberers had faced before. The path wound through dense forests where sunlight struggled to penetrate thick canopies of tangled branches. The air was heavy with an unnatural stillness, broken only by distant echoes of rustling leaves and faint whispers that seemed to ride the cold wind like secrets carried on breath. Eloan Bradford led the way, the silver pendant still resting against her chest, its black feather catching the scant light and pulsing faintly. Corin Ravenscroft followed close, clutching his maps, while Raphael Montague and Helena Dalrymple moved silently behind, their senses sharpened by the palpable tension that clung to the forest. As they approached the outskirts of Haven Brook, the familiar markers of civilization gave way to a village cloaked in shadows. Windows were shuttered tight, and streets lay deserted, save for the flickering glow of distant lanterns casting long, trembling shadows against weathered stone walls. At the village square stood the old sanctuary, an ancient stone edifice draped in creeping vines and dark moss. Its towering spires reached toward a sky swollen with bruised clouds, and the air around it thrummed with a low, ominous energy. Helena stepped forward, translating an inscription above the sanctuary's heavy oak doors. Keeper of memories, guardian of truth, let light dispel the darkness that seeks to consume. Eloan touched the door's carved surface, feeling a shiver travel through her fingertips. "This place has been tainted," she whispered. "The archive's kin suffers." They pushed open the doors, the heavy timbers groaning as they revealed a cavernous hall. Inside, shadows writhed unnaturally, coalescing into shapes that flickered at the edges of vision, whispers made manifest, echoes twisted by fear and desperation. Raphael raised his violin, fingers trembling as he drew his bow across the strings. The first notes pierced the gloom, weaving a melody of hope and remembrance that pushed back the creeping darkness. The shadows recoiled but did not vanish. Corin scanned the chamber, eyes sharp. "We need to find the source of this corruption." Guided by Helena's translations, they discovered a sealed chamber beneath the sanctuary, its entrance hidden beneath a tattered tapestry depicting the memory keeper entwined with a serpent of shadow. Eloan drew a deep breath. "This is where the battle begins." Inside the chamber, they found a corrupted crystal pulsating with dark energy, an antithesis to the archive's light. It had been poisoned by those who sought to manipulate memory for their own ends. The circle combined their strengths, Eloan's unwavering courage, Corin's knowledge of ancient paths, Raphael's music of healing, and Helena's wisdom of forgotten rites. Together, they performed a ritual of cleansing, their voices and instruments entwined with the archive's essence, battling the darkness with the pure light of remembrance. Hours passed as the struggle raged, until finally, the corrupted crystal shattered, releasing a burst of radiant energy that washed over the sanctuary, restoring its sanctity. Exhausted but triumphant, the circle emerged into the dawn light, the village slowly awakening from its fearful slumber. Havenbrook was safe for now, but the battle had revealed the true cost of their mission. Eloan looked to her companions, resolve burning in her eyes. The shadows will come again. But so will we. And with that vow, the circle of rememberers continued their eternal journey to protect the memories of the past, illuminate the present, and safeguard the future. The victory at Havenbrook marked only the beginning of a new chapter in the circle's journey. Though the sanctuary had been cleansed, the lingering shadows served as a grim reminder that the forces threatening the archive were persistent, cunning, and patient. Back in Meadowmont, beneath the glowing canopy of the standing tree, the circle convened once more. The chamber was alive with the soft hum of the archive's power, and the air carried the faint scent of rosemary and jasmine, reminders of the memories they had gathered and protected. Eloan unfolded a parchment, a newly written song penned by Raphael, inspired by their battle and the resilience of memory. "This melody is more than music," she said, her voice steady. "It is a call to all who cherish the past and seek to preserve it." Raphael lifted his violin, drawing a bow across the strings. The notes filled the chamber, weaving a tapestry of sound that echoed through stone and root. It was a song of renewal, of healing wounds both old and new, of hope reborn from darkness, and of the unbreakable bonds forged through shared memory. As the melody rose, Helena dipped her quill into the ink consecrated with memory spring water, transcribing the song into the archive's growing compendium. Corin mapped the reach of the melody, tracing the ripple effect it would have throughout the realm, touching hearts and awakening forgotten tales. The circle knew that their mission extended beyond stone and scrolls. It was a living endeavor, carried in song, story, and spirit. Together, they pledged to carry the song of renewal beyond Meadowmont, to places where memory had faded and shadows still lurked. And so, with the archive's light shining brighter than ever, the circle of rememberers set forth, carriers of memory, keepers of hope, and singers of the eternal song that binds all souls across time. Years had passed since the circle of rememberers first awakened a living archive beneath the standing tree. The kingdom of Meadowmont and the lands beyond flourished not just in prosperity, but in memory. Stories once lost to shadow now thrummed in the hearts of people young and old. Songs composed by Raphael echoed through village squares, Helena's translations opened forgotten wisdom to eager scholars, Corin's maps guided seekers to hidden places of power, and Eloan's journals became treasured chronicles of courage and compassion. The archive itself had grown, no longer confined beneath ancient roots but living within the community, woven into the very fabric of daily life. Festivals celebrated the past, children learned the histories not as distant tales, but as living parts of their identities. The memory of the Great Silence, once a weighty shadow, had been transformed into a symbol of resilience and renewal. On a gentle spring evening, beneath a sky ablaze with stars, the circle gathered once more beneath the standing tree. Time had softened their faces but deepened their resolve. They lit the eternal flame, a fire kindled from the memory spring's waters, burning with a light that never faded. Around the flame, they shared stories of their journey, of trials faced and victories won, of memories preserved and lives touched. Eloan spoke last, her voice clear and warm. The archive is not just stone or song. It is the light we carry within ourselves, passed from one heart to another. As long as we remember, as long as we tell our stories with honesty and love, the flame will never die. With hands joined, the circle pledged anew their commitment to safeguard memory not just for themselves, but for all who would come after. The living archive was a gift, a responsibility, and a promise, that no story, no voice, no life would ever be truly lost. As the eternal flame flickered softly beneath the ancient boughs, the archive whispered its gratitude, a timeless echo, woven through the ages, forever alive. And so ends the journey of the circle of rememberers for now. But as memory flows ever onward, new stories will rise, new keepers will stand, and the flame of remembrance will burn eternal. Title: The Living Archive, The Journey of the Circle of Rememberers. Description: In a world where memories and history can be forgotten or manipulated, the Circle of Rememberers Eloan, Corin, Raphael, and Helena embark on a mystical journey to discover and protect an ancient archive hidden beneath the standing tree. From overcoming trials rooted in the past to battling shadows that seek to erase truth, they blend music, maps, stories, and courage to preserve the light of memory. This tale explores the power of remembrance, friendship, and sacrifice, weaving a profound fantasy journey where every story is treasured to connect past, present, and future. Follow their inspiring quest to uncover the true meaning of memory and the importance of honoring it.